Now, a price floor is a legally mandated minimum price, so we also call it a minimum price. And when does the government actually implement a price floor or a minimum price? It implements a minimum price when it feels that specific goods, the prices are too low to support the incomes of those who are producing it. And often the case, it will be agricultural farmers who produce agricultural goods. Thus, when we look at minimum price, it's a way for the government to actually protect the interests of the producers who are producing these goods. Right now, I'm going to talk to you about how a minimum price is graphically represented. When we want to set a price floor or minimum price, we have to set it to be above the equilibrium price for it to be effective. When the price is above the equilibrium price, the quantity demanded will fall. Why will it fall? Because people are not willing to pay so much for this good at a higher price, so the quantity demanded will fall from Q0 to QD. Whereas at a higher price, producers, they will be more than happy to supply more. So the quantity supplied will increase from Q0 to QS. You're going to see a surplus of QS, QD, where your quantity supplied now outweighs your quantity demanded, creating a surplus of these goods. And what would be an interesting way of looking at the concept of minimum price? That would be your minimum wage system that most countries actually adopt. Let's look at the context of a minimum wage. Why is a minimum wage sometimes a good idea and yet sometimes we say it's a bad idea? Now, countries that implement minimum wage, they come with good intentions. Why would countries want to put out a minimum wage system? That would be because they feel that the lower income segments of society don't have enough to go by in their daily lives. So that minimum wage is a way to protect the interests of lower income groups in society. But yet, when you implement a minimum wage, what is actually going to happen? At a higher wage, more workers will be willing to work. So the quantity supplied of workers will increase. Yet at a higher wage, what will firms be willing to do? They will be less willing to hire workers, causing quantity demanded for workers to fall. So when you have an increase in quantity supply of workers, yet your quantity demanded of workers goes down, you're going to have a surplus of workers, which in macro terms we call it unemployment. How can we apply this and think of more ways to look at the concept of minimum wage and whether is it a good idea? Put yourself in the shoes of an employer. If you are hiring workers whose skills are more or less low skilled and they are repetitive in nature, and you find that the wages of these workers are constantly going up, what will you try to do? You will find some way to automate. When you find some ways to automate and replace these workers with machinery, equipment or automation processes, what happens to the number of workers hired? It will fall, causing actually unemployment to worsen further. Thus, it might not always be a great idea for the government to intervene in the context of minimum wages.